The heat of the Nevada desert was suffocating. The dry wind carried grains of sand swirling into sporadic dust devils that danced under the blazing sun. I was only a few miles from the infamous Area 51. My heart pounded as I gripped the mysterious envelope I had received in Egypt. Inside was a photograph, a detailed diagram of the pyramids overlaid onto what initially looked like an ordinary topographic map. But upon closer inspection, I realized that the contours matched perfectly with the coordinates of the highly classified U.S. military base. This connection made no sense, at least not officially. What could 5,000-year-old monuments possibly have in common with a modern, ultra-secret facility? Someone wanted me to find out. I followed the map to a precise location in the middle of nowhere. There were no visible structures, only endless desert. But there, beneath a rock marked with a symbol eerily similar to an Egyptian hieroglyph, I found something unexpected, a small briefcase. Inside, I discovered ancient documents, yellowed with age, and an old cassette recorder. A label on the tape bore a single name, Project Orion Window. Minutes later, my phone rang. The number was unknown. "Did you find the briefcase?" The voice belonged to an older man, but it was firm and unwavering. "Who are you?" I asked, trying to steady my breathing. "My name doesn't matter, but what I have to tell you might change the way you see history. What was discovered in the pyramids of Egypt didn't stay there. The United States spent decades trying to understand these secrets, and Area 51 was the epicenter of their research." He paused, as if debating whether he should continue. Project Orion Window was an experiment to open a bridge to the past, and they succeeded. For a brief moment, they looked through time. But the experiment got out of control. Something came through the portal, and everything was covered up. "What came through?" I asked, feeling a chill crawl down my spine. Silence. A few seconds passed before he spoke again. "You need to find the remaining tapes. What's on the recording you have is only the beginning. Follow the coordinates I left at the end of the document. And be careful. If they find out you're investigating this, they will try to stop you." When I pressed play on the recorder, a distorted, static-filled voice filled the air. Classified file, Orion Window Experiment, date, September 12, 1983. Activation sequence initiated. A mechanical humming echoed through the recording, followed by frantic voices in the background. Scientists arguing in a panic. "The pulse intensity is rising," one of them shouted. Another voice, more alarmed. "Something is responding. We weren't expecting interaction." Suddenly, a loud burst of static consumed the tape. Then, silence. The recording had been abruptly cut off. What did they mean by interaction? With what or who had they been trying to communicate? The coordinates led me to a forgotten structure in the middle of the desert. An old underground complex surrounded by debris and faded warning signs worn down by time. The facility appeared to have been abandoned for decades, but as I stepped inside, I found evidence that suggested otherwise. There were fresh footprints in the dust. Inside, stacks of classified dossiers revealed that the base had conducted experiments to map past events through an unknown magnetic anomaly. But one of the more recent documents, dated 1996, carried a warning about unforeseen side effects. As I moved through the dark corridors, I noticed that some of the emergency lights still flickered, signaling that at least part of the facility was still receiving power. The air was thick with a metallic scent, mixed with something faintly burnt. Then, in one of the rooms, I found a wall covered in frantic, erratic notes, written by someone in a clear state of distress. "They saw us. Time is not a line, it's a mirror." On a table at the center of the room, I found damaged monitoring equipment. Among them, an old CRT monitor was still on, its screen filled with static. As I stepped closer, I realized the interference was forming geometric patterns, the same shapes found in ancient monuments around the world. At the far end of the main corridor, a reinforced door stood locked with heavy military-grade padlocks. Next to it, scrawled on the wall in faded red paint, were ominous words. The portal must not be reopened. I approached the door and placed my hand on the cold metal. At that exact moment, a low hum filled the air, almost imperceptible but constant. It was as if something behind that wall was still operational. I glanced around, expecting to see movement, but everything remained still. Then, I noticed something chilling. In the reflection of a shattered glass screen on the floor, I could have sworn I saw a shadow move behind me. I spun around instantly, but the corridor was empty. My breath caught in my throat. I was not alone. My heart pounded. If the experiment had been shut down, why was this place still being monitored? Whatever was behind that door had to be dangerous enough for the government to bury the entire project under layers of secrecy. The vibration in the floor persisted, a faint but steady pulse emanating from behind the locked door. If the portal had truly existed, could it still be active? And, more importantly, what had come through before it was sealed? I had to find out. The cold, dark corridor of the abandoned complex stretched out before me. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of metal and the faint charge of electricity. The flickering emergency lights cast erratic shadows, as if something unseen was draining the last remnants of power from the facility. I stood before a reinforced door, its military-grade padlocks corroded with time. The hum beneath my feet had not stopped. Whatever was behind that door was still alive. Project Orion Window, the experiment the scientists at Area 51 had supposedly shut down decades ago, had never truly been deactivated. The question was, what remained of it, and what had happened to those who had attempted to manipulate time? My hand trembled as I reached for the door. If the warnings were true, this place contained something that should not exist in our reality, and I was about to find out what it was. With effort, I forced the door open. A sharp crack echoed through the corridor as the rusted locks gave way. The heavy metal door groaned as it swung open, revealing a vast underground chamber bathed in flickering green light. The space was massive, lined with outdated electronic panels coated in dust, their exposed cables snaking across the floor like veins of a forgotten machine. At the center of the room stood a colossal device, resembling a particle accelerator with concentric metal rings surrounding a pulsating core of energy. The air around it shimmered, as if bending light itself. On the walls, old monitors displayed distorted footage, images capturing something that should not exist. I approached a cluttered desk covered in old reports and cataloged VHS tapes. I grabbed one and inserted it into a nearby monitor. The screen flickered before stabilizing, revealing a grainy video of a group of scientists in lab coats. Their leader spoke directly into the camera, his expression tense. Date, September 14th, 1983. We are initiating Phase 2 of Project Orion Window. If we can stabilize the rift, we may be able to capture images from the past, but the signals we're receiving suggest that something may be trying to respond. The recording abruptly cut to static before shifting to a chaotic scene. Grainy footage of a spiraling void opening in midair, crackling with streaks of lightning. The distortion worsened as alarms blared. Scientists scrambled for the exits, and panicked screams filled the air. For a brief moment, the camera captured a silhouette, a humanoid figure emerging from the light, before the screen went black. The experiment failed. Shut it down, don't let it escape. I felt my breath catch in my throat. Something had come through before they could close the portal. At that moment, from behind a pillar, emerged an elderly man with a hunched posture, clad in a lab coat worn and tattered by time. He hurried toward me, introducing himself as Dr. Alan Fisher, his gaze sharp, as if he had been watching me closely while I processed what I had just seen. He took a deep breath and, in a hushed voice, revealed what the most classified documents had never disclosed to the public. Orion Window was never about observing the past. That was a lie. fed to the younger scientists to maintain secrecy. The real objective was to see the future. I stood frozen. My heart pounded in my chest. He continued. The portal opened, and for a few minutes we captured clear images, but what we saw was not what we expected. Fisher typed a code into the control panel. An old video flickered onto the screen. The footage was grainy, but clear enough to send a chill down my spine. It was Earth, but something was terribly wrong. The sky was red, filled with swirling black clouds. Cities lay in ruins. The oceans had swallowed entire continents. Thousands, perhaps millions of bodies were scattered across an unrecognizable landscape. Fisher's voice dropped to a whisper. We saw the end. We saw a future where humanity didn't survive. My mind reeled. Then, why was the experiment shut down? Fisher looked at me, his eyes carrying a weight beyond words. Because we realized. We caused it. The scientists tried to prevent the future collapse. But with every attempt to alter the present, new simulations revealed the same outcome. No matter what they did, the end was always the same. They began to suspect that observing the future had set this fate in motion. Like a person seeing their own death and desperately trying to avoid it, only to fall into the very trap they were trying to escape. The most terrifying part? The final simulation showed that the collapse was accelerating. Every interference brought it closer. The military made a choice. Bury the project, shut the portal, erase the records, pretend it never happened. But it was already too late. Fisher opened a drawer and pulled out a small metallic disc. This contains the final recording of the experiment, the only remaining copy. It holds the last images, and a detail we only noticed too late. I took the disc with trembling hands. What's on it? Fisher hesitated, then spoke. A transmission. Something, or someone, from the future, trying to warn us. I left the complex, clutching the metallic disc tightly against my chest. The desert night was cold, a stark contrast to the tension burning inside me. The disc rested in my palm, heavier than its material weight, because if this recording truly contained a message from the future, then the fate of humanity might still be changeable. Or had we already sealed our doom? Dr. Fisher told me this was the only remaining copy of the transmission before the experiment was shut down. The military had buried the records when they realized that observing the future might have been the very act that triggered the collapse. But who sent this message, and what were they trying to tell us before it was too late? I had to find out. And maybe, just maybe, I was about to uncover the most unsettling truth of my entire journey. I traveled to a secure location where I could analyze the contents of the disk without interference. Connecting the device to an old military file reader, I watched as the screen flickered to life. The file's encoding was unusual, but after a few minutes I managed to access it. The video began with distorted noises and static. Slowly, fragmented images emerged. I saw a devastated city, the same vision the scientists had captured in the original transmission: a crimson sky, crumbling buildings, an endless sea of silence and death. But then something changed. A voice rose from the static. If anyone can hear us, the collapse has already happened, but it wasn't inevitable. We made a mistake, and you still have a chance. My heart pounded. Whoever was speaking was trying to warn us about something specific. I kept watching, analyzing every frame. The image shifted again. A set of coordinates flashed on the screen. A location I didn't recognize. The desert, a hidden base, an ancient monument. Then the voice returned. This is what we tried to change, and this is what destroyed us. If you don't uncover the truth before repeating our mistakes, it will be too late. The coordinates led me to a new secret location, an abandoned underground bunker. According to documents I uncovered in my investigation, this was a secondary test site where a portal parallel to the one at Area 51 had been constructed and never officially deactivated. As I explored the subterranean structure, I realized it was still partially functional. Monitors flickered. Emergency lights pulsed dimly. At the bunker's center, beneath layers of dust, rested a device eerily similar to the Orion Window Project. But this one was different. It was still active. Scattered across the walls, I found scribbled notes from the scientists who had once worked here. Some were hastily crossed out, as if someone had tried to erase the truth. The portal is oscillating between different moments. We can't control it. Something came through, something that doesn't belong to this time. Then, a noise. A deep, reverberating hum echoed through the bunker. I turned toward the portal just as it began to glow. Unstable, pulsing, alive. It was reactivating on its own. I had two choices. Shut it down for good or let it open. I knew I might be making the same mistake as the scientists before me, but this was my last chance to uncover the truth. I stepped closer, watching as the structure pulsed with energy. Then the portal stabilized, and an image appeared. A human face. No, many faces. Men and women, their expressions filled with desperation. They stood in a ruined landscape, trying to communicate with me. You need to understand, it wasn't just a vision. The experiment itself doomed us. Every time we tried to see the future, it came closer. Our own curiosity is what destroyed us. A chill ran down my spine. The scientists hadn't just seen the future, they had accelerated it. It was as if the mere act of observing had been the trigger for everything that followed. Is our destiny already sealed? The transmission trembled, and electrical sparks crackled through the room. The voice continued. We tried to change the future. We tried to warn you, but the message never arrived in time. And now you're watching us, which means you've already made the wrong choice. The transmission began to falter, the image flickering in and out. But before it disappeared completely, the voice spoke one last time. Not all is lost. The answer lies in the past, before everything, before the first collapse. And then, with a sharp snap, the portal closed. I stood there, frozen, trying to process everything. They were telling us this wasn't the first time it had happened. The future was destroyed by failed attempts to change it, but there was still a chance, a last alternative, to find the first civilization that survived a similar collapse. And the final clue would take me to the most unexplored place on the planet, Antarctica. I didn't know if I'd just witnessed a warning or a plea for help from the future. But one thing was certain. If we want to survive, we must look back to where it all began. Something was buried before recorded history, something that could hold the final piece of this puzzle. And now I had a new destination. I left the bunker knowing that this time I wasn't just investigating a mystery, I was racing against time.